Hi guys, this is my third video. This is chapter 2 of my story, my book, my life story. You might want to go back and watch the first 2 videos before you watch this one. That way things make sense. I want to re-mention that each chapter is an individual relationship in my life up until about chapter 6, and things kind of merge together. And then it's one story. This gives you the opportunity to see the individual dynamics between me and the people in my lives and some of the things I've gone through. This episode is how you get to see how I'm a miracle. And I'm going to read it. As I mentioned, that just helps me stay on track and not lose track of what I'm saying. So, here we go. Chapter 2, My Mother. My mother lost her father when she was 2. She lost her mother when she was 17. She is the second born of 7 children. So her mother did remarry 3 or 4 more times and had more siblings. To avoid being put in a children's home, she got married at 17. My mother grew up rough. For her, life was all about survival. She never really learned how to put other people first. That motherly instinct that most moms have, well, hers is broken. She at some point got a job working at a cafe. The person running the cafe would send her to take food or lunch plates to the man that would eventually be my dad. He was the manager of a service station down the road. His grandmother ran the cafe. He was engaged to be married to another woman. But at some point, that engagement got canceled. My parents decided they wanted to marry each other. But remember, my mom's already married. So they hatched a plan to get her husband to divorce her. He was not able to have children of his own. So they figured if she got pregnant, he would give her a divorce. So that's what they did. Well, it didn't work quite the way they planned, because her husband was happy to stay married and raise me as his child. He desperately wanted children. But anyway, long story short, my father and this man came to some sort of agreement, according to my dad. The divorce did take place, and my parents married each other. My mother was about 5.5 months pregnant with me, and they went to the preacher's house and got married. 2.5 months later, my mom went into labor. They called the doctor and said, hey, we're on the way to the hospital. And so they got to the hospital, and my head had crowned. The doctor wasn't there yet. He was on the way, but he wasn't there yet. The nurse at the hospital panicked. She really freaked out. She pushed me back in. I turned, and fluid got in my lungs. So at this point, I was breech also. At some point during this ordeal, my father told me that he was asked to choose, save me or save his wife. And my dad said save his wife. And pause for a second. I don't blame my dad for that in any way. There was never any resentment for that. So, I didn't really even know much about it until I was older anyway. So, he said, save my wife, we can have more children. Hours later, I was delivered, but I was dead. The doctor did not want to leave it at that. He didn't want to give up, so he tried to do CPR on me, and he was successful. I guess you could say he literally breathed life into me. God gave my life back. I spent 2 weeks in an incubator at the hospital after my mom went home. My parents came to pick me up, and they were told that there was no way to know how long I had been without oxygen to my brain. So it was very possible that I had brain damage, that I may never walk or talk like a normal child, that I would have to possibly have developmental delays. So some of the damage was to my lungs as well. So the doctor told them to let me cry sometimes to help strengthen my lungs. So my parents took home what they thought was a damaged goods baby. The biggest problem, though, was I was a girl. My mother desperately wanted a boy. There were times when she would even dress me like a boy. I was told of a time when my father took me out of my mother's arms and threw me into the baby bed. My mother says I bounced off the wall. I don't know. Don't remember it. But he took those instructions to let me cry very serious. My mother wanted to be able to pick me up, and my dad wanted me to cry. So, anyway, however, 6 months or so, as my dad told me, that I was sitting on a table at the laundromat. I got knocked off, fell off somehow or another. I fell onto the concrete floor and was knocked unconscious. They took me to the ER. So in spite of all that, I was able to walk by the time I was 9 months old. That was according to what my dad told me. I did talk and develop as a normal child. When it was time for me to go to school, I had to take an IQ test. I actually remember taking that test. My parents were told that I have a very high IQ, and I was able to start kindergarten on time. I was 5 when I started school. Now, I need to back up a couple years here. When I was almost 2, my brother was born. Needless to say, my mother was happy to have her son she desperately wanted. I quickly took a back seat to my brother. Now, keep in mind, I liked having a brother. I love my brother. I looked out for him. I really did. I just wish my mother loved me as much as she did him. Eventually, the new wore off, and he didn't get as much attention, although she did, tend to brag on him and his accomplishments. And there are certain things where he was first in her mind. So, anyway. My mother's uncles were at the children's home, as I mentioned. But they would come and stay with us on the weekends. My parents would go pick them up on Friday and take them back on Sundays. When I was age 5, I was abused by one of my uncles. Abuse. I don't know what I'm allowed to say on YouTube. I remember entering kindergarten and wondering if it was normal. I remember wondering if I was normal and if other girls had these same things going on. Don't know why I remember that. When he came on the weekends, I knew what was going to happen. So when I went to bed, I would try to tuck the covers around myself really tight so he would leave me alone. I remember pretending to be asleep when he would come in. I was scared of what he would do to me if he knew I was awake. Even after growing up and being married, I can't sleep without covers. It's just one of those automatic things that we pick up I was talking about. My abuser was caught in the act, abusing another child. That is when my abuse stopped. In spite of being caught in the act, though, my mother refused to believe that her brother would do such a thing. She defended him. And so for that reason, I did not tell my parents at that time about my abuse. She would not have believed me, and she might have even blamed me. A few years later, he did actually go to prison for abusing his own son. My mother visited him in prison every chance she got. She said the boy was lying and that his mother put him up to it and told him what to say, all those things. My abuser got out of prison and he was around. I was forced to be around him. It was very uncomfortable, but at least he was not messing with me. One day out of the blue, he just disappeared for years. Nobody knew where he was. He showed up again, sick, and then he died. When he died, my mother called me all upset on the phone and wanted me to help pay for his funeral. Did she expect me to offer much comfort? I don't know. It may sound cold, but at least he couldn't hurt children anymore. I do know of some other kids that were abused by him. My two youngest uncles, they were only 10 and 8 years older than me. They played with us. They were almost like our brothers to a point. They played football with us, pushed us on a rope swing, taught us how to do flips on the bed. They taught us how to shoot. I hope I'm allowed to say that. They like to fish, hunt, and go do all kinds of outdoor things. We would eat rabbit, deer, squirrel. So we had food from their adventures. Fish, of course. I'm not a huge fish fan, but we had a lot of grill outs at our family gatherings. Those were actually fun. Although, as my youngest uncle, he developed a drinking problem as he got older. And so some of those family gatherings would get ugly. He would get drunk. I remember one time he pulled out a knife and threatened his brother. That is when I decided I didn't want anything to do with drinking. I watched him get sick, and I watched his behavior. I didn't see any fun in it. So, also, my mother's youngest sister, her husband was an alcoholic. He would get drunk, beat her up. She would run to our house, end up in a fist fight with my father. So I saw all this and decided I didn't want anything to do with drinking. I didn't want to date anybody who did. And I know the Bible says that, drinking's not a sin necessarily, but getting drunk is. And drinking is just a temptation. I didn't want the temptation. My mother had several boyfriends over the years. She denies it. She thinks somehow we were too young to know about it, I guess. Not to mention people told us about it, but I know what I saw in my own eyes. She packed up and left us several times. I think 4. The 4th time was the last. One of the times she left, I was maybe 7, 8. It was right before Christmas. She packed up, moved out, went to stay with her grandmother. I don't know exactly how old I was, as I mentioned. But Dad convinced her to come back home. The next day I asked my mother, "Why did you leave?" She looked at me with hate and said, "To get away from you." She was constantly saying things to me like that. I do remember her saying she hated me. She wished I was never born. She constantly reminded me that I was not a boy. She firmly believes that a boy should be the firstborn child. She blamed me. She said it was my fault she had to marry my father. I think she resented me for almost dying, being born. Anyway, there was one morning after a late night of partying. I looked at her, was a little puzzled. There was marks all over her face and neck. With ugliness in her voice, she spoke to me and said, "What the are you looking at?" Well, as I got older, I figured it out. She had hickeys all over her face and neck. So there was a lot of them. But her boyfriends would come to the house when Dad was not home. We would see these things. We knew what was going on, although she denies ever having boyfriends. But anyway, there were some weekends when I wasn't home. There was a safe place I had to go to, thankfully. I'll mention that later. But on the weekends I wasn't home, she'd go through my room and clean it out and give away all my stuff. She gave away all my toys to a flea market once. I had no say in what she got rid of. She just did it. She didn't care about my feelings. When I was 13, my sister was born. I was happy to have a sister. I'd always wanted a sister. I finally had one. Dad didn't believe she was his child. for a while. He eventually came to accept that she is his child. According to my mother, she took fertility drugs to get pregnant. They thought that having another child would save their marriage. Dad later accepted the fact that she was his, as I said, and raised her as his. Every day after school, I would go and get my sister from our granny next door. She would stay with granny while I was at school. And I would come home and get her and look after her until my parents got home from work. My mother would party on the weekends, so while she was partying and my daddy was out with his girlfriend, I was home taking care of my baby sister. A lot of people thought she was my child. One ignorant woman even said that my parents claimed her to hide my sin, which is absolutely not the case. There was once back up a second. She would sleep with me. I would wake up at night and feed her. As she got older and would wet the bed, I was the one that got peed on. Anyway, my mother once asked me if I was taking care of my sister too much and if she was leaving her with me too much. I said no. I was so much wanting to protect my sister that I lied. I said no because I was scared of where my sister would get left if I didn't take care of her. So, move on to when my sister was about 5 years old. My mother finally left home for the last time. I was 18 at this time and about 2 months away from graduating high school. She handed my sister over to an 80-something-year-old great-grandmother to raise. I guess she thought that would be the best thing for my sister. And I guess in some ways it probably was. She was in a safe place for the most part. Mother moved in with her new boyfriend, and she never looked back. Now, my granny was not quite herself mentally at this point. She would hit my sister, and she'd come running over and get me to help her. I'd end up in quite a few disputes with my grandmother over my sister, but there was a lot of issues like this. My parents were so wrapped up in themselves, they didn't realize that my grandmother was way too old to be taken care of. And this is my great-grandmother. We called her Granny. She shouldn't have been taking care of a child. They used my sister as a weapon against each other. And I used to like to point out their mistakes in raising my sister, which, of course, this was not welcome advice from a teenager. I hoped they would wake up and realize what they were doing, but they didn't. And when I was old enough that I was living on my own and taking care of myself, I wanted her to be able to come live with me, but they wouldn't let that happen. I just wanted to save my sister from my parents, but I wasn't able to do that. My mother finally married this boyfriend. He had 4 children of his own that he had lost custody of. It was said that there was some abuse. I don't know. I can't confirm that. But their oldest son didn't live with them. He was of age. He lived somewhere else. So my mother helped get custody of them. There were 2 boys and a girl that came to live with them. And they became her children. She pretty much ignored us. Although my sister did have some visitations with her. There were a lot of weekends when my mom wouldn't show up to get her, though. She would have her bags packed and sitting there waiting, and my mom never show up. So I'm going to back up a little bit, a little more dynamic to my relationship with my mother. She never had the talk with me. When I was 9, she told me about the monthly cycle that girls get, but she never talked to me about the rest, ever. I did find out, eventually, I was in the 7th grade, the health department came to the school and separated the girls from the boys into separate classrooms. And that's how I found out. So, she never really taught me anything that a girl should know from her mother. I found out from other people. I never learned about shaving your legs or arms or under your arms. In fact, she got mad at me. One time she caught me shaving my legs. She got mad. So, she did teach me how to put on makeup. that was one thing that she taught me how to do, so that's good. There were a few rare moments when we had quality time together, but as I said, they were rare. I craved her attention, but I was often rejected. She was happy to pick fights with me. She'd pick fights with me and end up fighting with my dad. She mostly lived to make herself happy. She used to go in my closet and take my clothes. She'd take something out she liked the way it looked, and voila, it was hers. She did not buy the clothes for me. So, in my book, it was stealing. But anyway, I got to a point where I would go in her closet and do the same thing. I guess I was like, well, I'm going to show her how that feels. When I was 13-ish, around 13, 14, she made comments about having to wash my clothes. So I just decided I was going to start washing my own clothes from then on. I never washed anybody else's, and she complained about that. I spent most of my teen years trying to live down my mother's reputation. People made certain assumptions about me based off what they knew about her. So, when I was in high school, I was propositioned by a boy. I guess I was in 11th or 12th grade. He said, quote, "I already had your mother." I was disgusted, humiliated. All I wanted to do was just go crawl under a rock somewhere and hide. I remember going to church, people pointing, whispering, and people didn't treat me very well. I was her daughter, so of course that automatically made me what she was. I went to school many times crying because of something she said or did to me. She used to have a nickname for me. It was a vulgar name, so I can't say it on here. She never saw anything wrong with it. Now, as an adult, I think about that name, and she called me that because that's how she saw me. It's a name she calls women she don't like. So, I spent most of my life having to prove I'm not like her. I finally had it out with my mother. I was probably 19 or 20, somewhere around in there. Just blasted her. All the anger and hurt. Told her how she made me feel worthless, rejected, abandoned. I told her she had a second chance to get things right with my sister. If she would change her ways. But she didn't wake up. It should have been a wake-up call, but it wasn't. Nothing changed. So many times I chased after a relationship only to get rejected. But I'm not saying this because I want to bash my mother. It's not my intent. This is my life experience. This is what I dealt with. The only way to understand me and my struggles is to hear these things, one relationship at a time. So, my next entry will be about my father. So, some commentary on this is, this would be a good chance to start noticing some of those family cycles and how I was able to break free from it. God gave me my life back. He brought me back from the dead. Not only that, He healed me. If I had any brain damage, it was healed. He delivered me from my abuser. Although my mother was an emotional abuse, so multiple abuse here. God gave me the insight. I'm thinking about my abuse and what 5-year-old thinks I'm going to pretend to be asleep for my safety's sake. That can only have been God. I was able to recognize certain sin in my parents. And I was, even at a young age, it was just this insight that I don't want to repeat that. I don't want to repeat their mistakes. I don't want to have that kind of family when I was grown. So I was able to look at their mistakes and learn from them. I try to teach my own that, learn from other people's mistakes. And before you take advice from somebody, consider where that advice is coming from. Look at their life and where they are and decide whether or not it's worthy advice. I also, with my own kids, steer them away from drug and alcohol abuse, because when you're drunk, you're not in control. The alcohol is. And I didn't want to be in a situation where I was not in control of myself. And I tried to raise my kids that way. There is a right way to raise kids and a wrong way. God's way is the right way. And that's the way I looked at it. Any other way is, God's got to be in the middle. That's just, the only way I was able to steer clear of about a lot of things is because of God and the Bible and knowing what was right and wrong. That's how I stayed clear of some of these things. As parents, I'm talking to parents now, every single choice you make, every action you take affects your children. Everything. It affects other people too, your spouse and so on, but especially for this moment, think about it before you do something, how it's going to affect your kids. Try to look at things from your kids' point of view. Every single thing you do teaches. When you get mad and throw a tantrum, or you're teaching your kids to throw a tantrum. And that's not to say I don't get angry. I did. I would tell my kids, I'm like, Mama needs time out. And I would go in my room, sit down, pray, calm myself down. Then I would come back and say, okay, this is why I'm upset. And, sorry. If your kids hear you telling lies to other people, making up stories, they're going to learn to tell lies and make up stories. And you're not going to be able to trust your kid to tell you the truth, because they know that you lie, so it's okay for them to do it. If you're texting and driving your car, guess what? Your teenager's going to do the same thing. It's just the way it is. You can't, you can tell them don't do what I do, but they're going to ignore your words. They're going to pay attention to what they see. How you walk with God teaches your children how to walk with God. Let them see you read the Bible. Let them see you praying. Pray with them. Teach them that. And don't be afraid to apologize to your kids. When you're human. When you mess up, I've done this. When I got mad at one day, I yelled at my son, snapped at him. And I'm like, oh my gosh, son, I'm so sorry. Mommy's had a bad day. It's not your fault that I did this. He does not need to internalize that I made him feel that way. No. So don't be afraid to apologize to your kids. It teaches them to own their mistakes and repent by you doing it. It also teaches them that you're a human being and you got feelings. You got things that, just like they do. But it also teaches them how to forgive. And they should see you be able to forgive other people. You think, well, my kids are too young to understand this or understand that. Well, no, don't assume that. Some kids are way smarter than you think, and they got intuition out the wazoo sometimes. Don't presume that they don't understand. And what they don't understand now, they're going to grow up, and then they're going to look back and they're going to say, oh, that's what that was. Yeah. And you never know what your child's going to remember. I can go talk to my brother, and he's got memories I don't remember. So it's just the way it is. But you also never know what's going to warp the child of a mind. You never know what's going to warp the mind of your child. They're young. They're still developing. There's certain knowledge and reasoning skills they don't have. And it can really warp their thinking, okay? And above all else, your kids are going to remember how you made them feel. If you make them feel worthless, they're going to feel worthless. Their self-esteem is riding on how you treat them. They're going to remember how you made them feel, good and bad. And as far as the talk, you don't have to tell your kids stuff too young. The there are psychologists out there to tell you that at certain ages, kids are way too young to know this. It really messes with them and their development. So, I mean, when your child comes to you and they got a simple question like at 9 that may be a little too young, but tell them what's appropriate for their age. And when we had the talk with our boys, it was not one talk. We had several over a period of time. We didn't just unload on, Also, I remember when my youngest was 5, came home and said, "Mom, what's a lesbian?" And I'm like, well, I was shocked that he would be asking such a question from school. I'm like, what are they teaching you at school? But anyway, I told him it's when 2 women get married, and that was that. That was simple enough for him to understand, and there was no need for great details. We also did explain to him the biblical view, on that. So, and please don't avoid the conversation with your kids altogether, because I know it's uncomfortable, but they need to hear it from a mature adult. They don't need to hear it from some immature brat at the schoolhouse no. They need to hear it from a mature adult, preferably a science-based explanation. This is how your body works. And from a biblical standpoint, this is what God expects. And no, there's not 2 sets of rules. One for girls and one for boys. Like it or not, there's only one 10 commandments. But anyway, moving on. Being a parent is as close as we get to knowing how it feels to be God. When your child disobeys you, disrespects you, you know how God feels when we sin. As much as you love your child, you know how God feels about loving you and your children. And God loves your children way more than you do. I mean, honestly, it's hard to us to fathom that, but you got to choose what kind of parent you're going to be. And so, how much you love your child and don't want to see them hurt, that's how much God doesn't want to see you hurt. But we make choices and get ourselves in trouble, just like our own kids. So, like I said, walking with our children is close as we get to feeling how God feels. How you walk with God teaches your children. How you walk with your child teaches them how to walk with God. Because eventually, they got to let go of your hand and hold on to the Lord. And so, they need to be able to know how to do that, and you're going to teach them. That's the parent's responsibility. Ultimately, when your child's born, that's when parenting begins. You can't wait till they're a teenager and out of control and say, I want to fix my kid. No, it starts when they're little. And one last thought here is, your child is not your best friend. They're your child. They need you to be their leader, not their you can be their confidant, but not the other way around. You don't need to unload all these adult issues and situations on your child. They're just not built for that. And it also leads to a lot of hard feelings. Especially, if you're married, that can lead to hard feelings because your kid's not supposed to know what's going on in your marriage. But if you're divorced, your kids don't need to know what's going on in that relationship with your new person or their parent. It's just not good for that child. They need to be left out of those adult situations. That's just from my own personal experience. So that is my video for today. My next video will be my father. So keep an eye out for that, and I'll talk to you next time.